guys, so you should have already completed excuse me, the review and reflect on pages 681 all the way through 684. Your pencil and eraser should be put completely away and your red pen should be out. Okay, so first of all, if your name, number, and date is not at the top, go ahead and write that with your red pen right now. And then let's look at number 1. Number 1 says write 3 examples of numbers that are decimals. Now your numbers are probably going to be different than mine, but as long as you have a ones place, followed by a decimal point, and at least a tenths place, maybe a hundredths place too, you are correct. So I will just write, a couple of my own examples. I have 2/10. I have 43 hundredths, and then 22 hundredths. Okay, now you may have completely different ones. That's okay, as long as they have a decimal point and a digit in the ones place, the tenths place, and maybe the hundredths. If you have several that look like this, that's okay. Okay, now we have to write 3 examples of numbers that are not decimals. Again, yours are going to look different than mine, but whole numbers and fractions would be examples of numbers that are not decimals. So if I had 1, even if I have 1/10, that's not a decimal. If I have a whole number, like 57, that is not a decimal. And then we'll just do, even if I have 45 hundredths, that's a fraction, it's still not a decimal. Now number 2, write 3 examples of decimals that have a 4 in the tenths place. Again, yours are going to be different, but as long as each number has a 4 in that place right after the decimal point, you are correct. So I have 4/10, 43 hundredths, and 46 hundredths. Now, number 3, write 3 examples of decimals that have a 5 in the hundredths place. Again, yours are going to be different than mine, but as long as they have 3 digits, and the last digit of each one is a 5, which is in the hundredths place, then you are correct. So I have 5 hundredths, 15 hundredths, and 25 hundredths. Okay, so if you just made a mistake and something does not work, go ahead and fix that with your red pen right now. As long as they are correct, even if they are not the same as mine, that's okay. Okay, let's move on to the concept check. For numbers 4 through 6, all we're doing is we're writing the decimal that is represented by each model. So we need to look at the models, figure out if it's broken into tenths or if it's broken into hundredths, and then name the decimal that the model is showing. So number 4, we can tell that this is a tenths grid. We'll go ahead and count just to make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, you know what? I can't really tell the difference. So let me look. I can't see where it ends, but we know it's a tenths grid. You know it's a tenths grid. You can count really quick. You know. I can't see where the lines are in this. But okay, so we can see that 6 out of 10 are shaded. So that means this model shows the decimal 6/10. Now number 5, we can tell that this is broken into 100 pieces. We have our 10 columns and our 10 rows. 10 times 10 is 100. So now we just need to count how many pieces are shaded out of 100. We have no full column shaded, so we know it's going to be less than 10 out of 100. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 5 out of 100 shaded. That does not look like that, because that means 5 out of 10, not 5 out of 100. We have no full columns, so we know there are no tenths, and there are 5 little individual pieces, so we have 5 hundredths. Now, number 6. Again, we can tell we have a hundredths grid, but now we do have full columns shaded, so that means we will have a digit in the tenths place. So let's count. Let's count how many full columns so that we know what goes in the tenths place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 full columns, so that means a 6 will go in the tenths place. But we're not done because then we have this partially filled column, so we need to count how many little pieces are left over, and that is the digit that will go in our hundredths place. 1, 2, 3. So that means 63 out of 100 pieces are shaded, or 63 hundredths. Now let's go on to the next page. Okay, so for numbers 7 through 10, we are going to shade the model, then write the decimal. So number 7, we have 4 out of 10. We know this is a tenths grid, so we'll go ahead and shade 4 pieces. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we know that 4 out of 10 is the same as 4 tenths, which looks like this. 4 tenths is the same as 4 out of 10. Now number 8, we have 39 out of 100. Well, we know that 30 means that 3 full columns will be shaded because each column has 10. If we shade 3 columns, that's 10 times 3, which is 30. So we'll go ahead and shade 3 full columns. 1, 2, 3. And then 39 means that there are 9 more left over. So we'll shade 9 of these little squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have 3 full columns. We have no full grids. We have 3 full columns, which means we have 3 tenths. And then we have 9 little extra hundredths. So that means we have a 9 in the hundredths place. 39 out of 100 is the same as 39 hundredths. Now number 9, we're doing something similar, but this time we're writing fractions. We're still shading the grids, but this time we're given the decimal and we have to write the fractions. So number 9 says, write 8 tenths as a fraction with a denominator of 10. Shade the grid. Well, we know 8 tenths means the same thing as 8 out of 10. So we'll shade 8 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then we know 8 tenths looks like 0.8 as a decimal, and a numerator of 8 with a denominator of 10 as a fraction. 8 tenths is equal to 8 tenths. Now number 10, we have write 41 hundredths as a fraction with a denominator of 100. Then shade the grid. Well, we know 41 hundredths is the same as 41 out of 100. So we know 40 means we have to shade 4 full columns. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that extra 1 in the hundredths place means we shade 1 extra little hundredth piece. We know that 41 hundredths as a decimal looks the same as a numerator of 41 and a denominator of 100. So 41 hundredths equals 41 hundredths. Okay, go ahead, make sure that you have checked with your red pen and fixed anything if you needed to, and let's move on to the next part. For numbers 11 and 12, the directions say write each fraction as an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. Then write the fraction as a decimal. So what we're going to do is first we're going to make these fractions an equivalent fraction with 100 as a denominator. Then we're going to write the decimal for our original fraction, not the new one. So in order to make each of these a fraction with a denominator of 100, we first need to figure out what we did to our denominator of 10 to make 100. And we know that we multiplied it by 10 because 10 times 10 equals 100. Whatever we do to the denominator, we also do to the numerator. 9 times 10 equals 90. So 9 tenths equals 90 hundredths. Now we're going to write the decimal for our original fraction. We know that 9 tenths means the same as 9 out of 10. And as a decimal, looks like a 0.9. decimal point 9. So we have 9 tenths, 90 hundredths, and 9 tenths that all show the same amount of a whole. Now number 12, we're going to do the same thing. We know we need to get a denominator of 100. We know that we have to multiply 10 by 10 to get 100. We know that whatever we do to the denominator, we have to do to the numerator. And 3 times 10 equals 30. So 3 tenths is equivalent to 30 hundredths. Now we need to write the decimal. 3 tenths is the same as 3 out of 10, which as a decimal looks like 0.3. So we know 3 tenths, 30 hundredths, and 3 tenths are all equivalent. Okay, now let's look at numbers 13 and 14. The directions say add. Write each sum as a fraction with a denominator of 100 and as a decimal. So that means you needed 2 answers for each of these. On number 13, we have 2 tenths plus 36 hundredths. Well, we know we can't add tenths and hundredths, so we have to change this, this fraction to a fraction with a denominator of 100. We know we multiply 10 times 10 to equal 100, so we have to multiply 2 times 10, which equals 20. So now we have 20 hundredths plus 36 hundredths. We have like fractions, so we can just follow the steps. We add the numerators as we normally would. 20 plus 36 is 56. And then we the denominator stays the same. So we have a 100. Normally we would simplify this, but in this case we're not, because now we're going to use this answer to create a decimal. We know that 56 hundredths is the same as 56 out of 100, which as a decimal looks like 0.56. So you need 56 hundredths both as a fraction and as a decimal. Now we're going to do the same thing for number 14. We have 7 tenths plus 13 hundredths. We can't add tenths and hundredths, so we need to change that 7 tenths so that it has a denominator of 100. We know that we multiply 10 times 10 to get 100. Whatever we do to the denominator, we have to do to the numerator. 7 times 10 equals 70, which means now we have 70 hundredths plus 13 hundredths. We can do this. We have like fractions now. So step 1, add the numerators. 70 plus 13 is 83. The denominator stays the same. So we have 83 hundredths. We are not going to try to simplify it, but we have to write it as a decimal. We know that 83 hundredths is the same as 83 out of 100, which as a decimal looks like 0.83. So you should have 83 hundredths as a fraction and as a decimal. Make sure that you are fixing with your red pen if you need to, because you need this to study for your test on Monday. Now, numbers 15 and 16 say order each set of decimals from greatest to least. So number 15, we have 3 tenths, 23 hundredths, and 61 hundredths. Now remember, in order to be able to order these, each decimal needs to have the same number of digits. 3 tenths only has 2 digits, so we're going to add a 0. Now we have 30 hundredths, 23 hundredths, and 61 hundredths. Now remember, in order to order them, we look at the places. In the ones place, we have all zeros. That doesn't help us, so let's move to the tenths place. We have a 3, a 2, and a 6. We know that 6 is greater than 3 and 2, so our first decimal, when we're ordering greatest to least, is 61 hundredths. And now we're done with that, and let's figure out what comes next. We're still going to look at the tenths place. We have a 3 and a 2. We know that 3 is greater than 2, so that means this decimal is going to come next. But we are not going to do this, because this is not what our problem gave us. 30 hundredths doesn't come next. 3 tenths comes next. Now, all we have left is 23 hundredths, which we know is correct because 2 is the least digit, is the smallest digit in the tenths place. Okay, now number 16, we have 72 hundredths, 5 tenths, and 69 hundredths. Step 1 is to make sure all of the decimals have the same number of digits. So we're going to add a 0 to 5 tenths, and now we have 50 hundredths. Again, now let's look at place value. In the ones place, we have 0, 0, 0. That doesn't help us, so let's move to the tenths place. We have a 7, a 5, and a 6. Well, we know that 7 is greater than 5 and 6, so that means 72 hundredths comes first. Now we're still going to look at the tenths place for the decimals we have left over. We have 5 and 6. We know that 6 is greater than 5, so that means 69 hundredths comes next. All we have left is this decimal, which we are not going to write as 50 hundredths because our problem gave us 5 tenths. So in order from greatest to least, we have 72 hundredths, 69 hundredths, and 5 tenths. Okay, let's move on to the word problems. I hope that you have units and words if you need them for each of these. If you need to pause this video and check that right now, go ahead and do it. I'm letting you do that. Okay. Okay, number 17 says, a barn has 10 animals. 3 of the animals are horses. Write a decimal to show what part of the barn are horses. So what that means is we have to figure out the decimal for the part of the animals that are horses. There are 10 animals, 3 of them are horses, which means 3 out of 10 are horses. So that means we know that as a decimal that looks like 0 decimal point 3. So 3 tenths are horses. If you just have 3 tenths and then horses, that's okay, but technically it would be are horses. If you have no words, then you need to add horses or are horses. If you don't have are, but you have horses, you're okay. Okay, number 18, we have a money problem. Allison bought a snack using the coins shown. Write a decimal to show what part of $1 she spent. So we know in all, $1 has 100 cents. So that means whatever amount of money this is going to be out of 100. We know that a dime is worth 10 cents. Is this a dime too? Let me look. Another dime? Yep, we have another dime. We have a penny, which is worth 1 cent. A nickel, which is worth 5 cents. And another penny, which is worth 1 cent. So now we have to add all of this together and figure out what part of 100 these coins show. 10 plus 10 is 20, plus 1 is 21, plus 5 is 26, plus 1 is 27. So that means we have 27 cents out of a possible 100 cents, which means we have 27 hundredths of a $1. She has 27 cents out of a total possible 100 cents, so that means we have 27 hundredths of a $1. If you did not put of a $1, but you put this before it, that's okay. If you put 27 hundredths $, that's okay too. As long as you have the word dollar or the dollar symbol, you have the unit. If you have neither, you need to go ahead and put that with your red pen. Okay, so for number 19, our problem looks a little different than the one on the board, but that's okay. I already went through and fixed it. And it says, John lives 67 hundredths of a mile from the recreation center. Oops. Bella lives 8 tenths of a mile from the recreation center. Who lives the greatest distance from the recreation center? Explain. So, the way we're going to explain this is we're going to show our work. We know that we are trying to figure out which one is greater, so we need to create an inequality. 67 hundredths, is it greater than, less than, or equal to 8 tenths? Well, in order to compare them, first we have to make sure they have the same number of digits. 67 hundredths has 3 digits, 8 tenths only has 2. So we're going to add a 0. Now we have 67 hundredths and 80 hundredths. We can compare those. We know 67 hundredths is the same as 67 out of 100, and 80 hundredths is the same as 80 out of 100. We know that 67 hundredths is 67 out of 100 would show less, have less shaded space than 80 out of 100. So that means 67 hundredths is less than 80 hundredths. Now that's not the answer to the question because it says who lives the greatest distance. We can't say 8 tenths, because now our original answer was in 8 tenths, so we can't leave it as 80 hundredths. We just needed that to compare. We can't say 8 tenths lives the greatest distance. That makes no sense. We have to say who, which is Bella, lives the greater distance from the recreation center. Bella, is that true? Do you live 8 tenths of a mile from a recreation center? I don't know. Okay. Very good. Now, number 20. It says, Joseph ran, oops, I should have fixed this one too. Joseph ran 65 hundredths of a mile in a race. So Joseph ran 65 hundredths of a mile in a race. Write the decimal to show what part of a mile Joseph ran. I'm just going to write a decimal. So Joseph ran 65 hundredths of a mile in a race. Write a decimal to show what part of a mile Joseph ran. Well, we know 65 hundredths means the same thing as 65 out of 100, which we know as a decimal looks like 0.65. So 65 hundredths is equivalent to 65 hundredths of a mile. This problem asked for both a number and a word because we had to use the unit. So make sure you have 65 hundredths as a decimal and the word mile. If not, use your red pen. Okay, number 21 is a multiple choice question. We may or may not have to show work, so let's read the problem to figure out what we need to do. Chase poured 3/10 of a liter of lemonade and 29 hundredths of a liter of raspberry juice into a pitcher. Which decimal is the total amount of liquid Chase poured into the pitcher? Now I know your question is worded a little differently, but it means the same exact thing. So what we have to do is we have to add these numbers together to get our answer. Now we have not learned how to actually add decimals. You will learn that next year. It's not hard, but we'll just hold off on that. So we will add them as fractions. So we have 3/10 plus 29 hundredths, and we have to get the answer. Make sure that you are showing work. If you did not show work for this problem, you need to use your red pen to do it. This is one where you needed to show your work to make sure that you got the correct answer. Now we can't add tenths and hundredths, so let's convert 3/10 to a fraction with 100 as the denominator. We know that we multiply 10 times 10 to get 100. Whatever we do to the denominator, we do to the numerator. 3 times 10 is 30. So now we have 30 hundredths plus 59 hundredths. Now we can add like normal. Add the numerators. 30 plus 29 is 59. Denominator stays the same. We're not even going to check for simplest form. We have 59 hundredths. We're not done because we don't have fractions listed here. So we have to find the option that is equal to 59 hundredths, which we know looks as a, 59 hundredths is the same as 59 out of 100. As a decimal, that looks like 0.59. So that means B 59 hundredths of a liter is the correct answer. Okay, so make sure you have checked that with your red pen. Do not tear it out. Keep it because you need it to study for your test. So do not tear it out. Do not hand it in to me. Keep it. You need it to study. Let's see. Make sure that you have done the reflect. If not, do it now. We're not going to go over the reflect because each of us might have a different answer. But reflect is your thoughts on what we've learned in this chapter. Keep this. Make sure that you study for your test. If you have any questions about the review, Skype me or FaceTime me later today to ask about it. You will not have a new math lesson tomorrow. Tomorrow's math will be all about studying for the test on Monday. So tomorrow you will have no math video, you will have no work to do other than studying what you've already done. You can also work on IXL, you can find examples of worksheets online to try out, whatever you want. Just if you have any questions about chapter 10, you need to Skype or FaceTime me between 1 and 5 today and tomorrow so that you are ready for your test on Monday. Make sure you know how to do everything we talked about in this chapter. Okay guys, so go ahead and make sure that you're studying.